Greetings. This is the Apetabi Ialosha Ola Omi Akalatunde, and this is Got to Be Oshun Television. This is day 5, moving swiftly into day 6 of my winter solstice detox. And while I was making one of my smoothies this afternoon, it dawned upon me that all of the fruits that I'm using, the fruits that I'm using primarily, as well as the herb that I'm using primarily, are the herbs and the fruits of Yemaja. And that is significant because the time of the winter solstice was repeated in allegories throughout ancient Africa. And one of the allegories is the tale of Auset and Ausar and Heru. And Auset is the Kemetic manifestation of the deity that in West Africa our ancestors called Yemaja. Um, One of the things that I loved that the first Kabiesi the first, or Baal Sejimade Fumi the first, Ibara Turun, stated upon founding Oyotunji and upon reviving the cultural traditions, especially spiritual traditions of our ancestors. He explained, because in the coat of arms of Oyotunji there is an Ankh. And he explained that the worship of the Orisha and the worship of the Vodun is the rain forest method of what our ancestors were doing in ancient Kemet. And I always thought that that was particularly beautiful. And he was an extremely astute man. He made many beautiful statements. So this is just one of his statements among the many that I love and reflect upon often. So from that perspective, when I think about Iyamaja and the fact that watermelon and papaya and mint are sacred to, then what came to my mind was the fact that the time of the winter solstice, the rebirth of the sun, is the time where the greatest, or not the greatest, but the most well-known story of Auset is occurring. You know, the allegory is the, I guess, the mythological way or the more poetic way of explaining what's going on scientifically. And that is something that I always say. I'm not sure if I've said it on video as yet, but African tradition and majority people tradition around the world is science explained poetically. It's science explained beautifully, and not explained from a linear perspective, but explained from a cyclical, beautiful, love centered and goddess centered perspective. So, for those of us who are not familiar, what I wanted to do tonight as I'm moving into day 6 of this particular fast is to share with you the what we would call in the Yoruba tradition the Itan, and what others may call a story of Asar and Aset and Heru. And Heru, well, I'll just move into the story in that way you'll understand. Um, Within the land of ancient Kemet, there came to be born a prophet. And he was a peripatetic prophet, which means that he walked around and he taught um, the goodness of life. And we would say, from an African perspective, the science of nature and the art of proper living to the people around him, to those who had ears, which means those who were able to comprehend, and to those who wanted to know. And this particular prophet was known at that time as Asar or Asir, depending upon, the pronunciation that you choose. And so Asar walked around ancient Kemet and ancient um, East Africa, Central Africa, Northern Africa, and he taught the science of, being connected with nature, being one with nature. From the Kemetic perspective, we would say Ma'at, the balance of living at one with the universe. Because of what he represented, Asar was disliked by his brother Set. And his brother Set felt that Asar, in being so vigilant and diligent about the fulfillment of his destiny, was usurping his power. Every child from an African perspective has an inheritance. Every child has a legacy from their parents that's coming to them. And Set felt that Ausar's goodness and his righteousness would keep him from getting this legacy. And so he conspired against his brother, and they fought. And Set took Ausar's body and cut it up into several pieces, and he spread the pieces all throughout the world. By the time that this fight occurred, Ausar had taken a wife, and the wife that he had taken was Auset. Auset is described as the beautiful goddess of the perfect black, coming forth onto this plane from the constellation of Sirius B. And I hope that I have that star system correct. And she is the manifestation of nurturing. She is the divine manifestation of motherhood and of that perfect love that you receive at the breast of your mother. So by this time, Ausar and Auset had married, and Set then killed his brother and dismembered him and spread his body in various pieces throughout the land. And Auset, being the dutiful wife, but not only the dutiful wife, but being the omni-powerful and omni-abundant African goddess, traveled throughout the world and gathered the dismembered parts of the body of her husband and put them all back together and made of him a mostly whole man again. There was one piece that was missing. It had been thrown into a river and swallowed by a catfish. And it was the phallus of Auset. It was his tool, his jed, as they call it in the Kemetic language, D-J-E-D, his tool of regeneration. And this piece was missing. So Auset created the first obelisk. And we see these beautiful tekens or obelisks that rise up out of the horizon in ancient Kemet. And so Auset recreated that. And she transformed herself into the Bennu bird. And she alighted upon the phallus of Ausar. And she was able to regenerate him to the point that she gathered his seed into her womb. From this seed, she grew Heru. And Heru would avenge all of the wrongs that were done to his father. Heru is manifested in us in our will, that motivating force that pushes us forward. But we also see Heru in the sun. So while Ausar had to go through the darkness of death, he was resurrected through his wife in Heru. And so this particular Etan, this particular part of Kemetic oral history speaks totally and completely to what we're watching during the winter solstice. We are seeing that everyone and everything that exists in this physical realm must go through stages of darkness. But once you have been through that stage of darkness, you are always reborn. You always have the opportunity to be reborn stronger and better and able to completely vanquish any obstacles or any foes or any naysayers or people who were maligning you that may have been in your past. You have the ability to overcome them. So this is what we see in Ausar, Auset, and Heru. And I'm sure that the story sounds extremely familiar. When Auset was going to conceive Heru, Tehuti, who is the messenger Neter in the Kemetic tradition, came to her and he told her that she would conceive a godlike child. And he held the ankh to her nose and allowed her to breathe in and breathe this life into her womb. And once Heru was born, then all of the other Neter gathered, and they said, "Come, let us adore him." So this is the beginning. This is the first telling of this tale of the resurrection and the rebirth of the Son. And we celebrate it in an anthropomorphic form because it's easier for us as humans to understand and connect to it if we can see how it happens to humans on the physical plane. So while we celebrate it that way in these beautiful tales of the Son being reborn, then we also celebrate it in a very realistic scientific way, and understanding that the Sun itself has gone through a stage of darkness and is now preparing to return. So I wanted to just share that particular story with my viewers so that we could be clear um, of the guiding force of this time. The guiding force of this time is Auset, is that mothering force, is that caring force, is that nurturing force. And she is the force that pulls us through this time of darkness back into the light. She is the force that remembers all of our parts, returns them to her womb where everything is safe, where nothing harmful can get to us, and then brings us forth again out into beautiful daybreak, beautiful light, which is one of the symbols of Heru. So I wanted to share that. I give thanks for the opportunity to share that. There is no differentiation between the philosophies of the majority people on Earth Mother. We all shared a common philosophy. And because of ecological differences and differences in language, you might find slight variations. But our philosophy and how we approached life and how we approached all of the different aspects of life, motherhood, fatherhood, loving, caring, growing, developing, how we approach those things was the same for all of us. So I wanted to share with you tonight this story from ancient Kemet. Kemet is the land that is now called Egypt. It is the child of the land of Nubia. And the people of Kemet said that they came from the south, where the great god Hapi dwells at the foothills of the mountains of the moon, which is, of course, Mount Kilimanjaro. So they come from that East African route, traveling up the Nile, because the Nile travels from south to north. And so this apex, this complete and total pinnacle of Nile Valley societies, knew itself to be a child of those East African and Central African traditions and did not see itself disconnected from those traditions. So when we think of ancient Kemet, which is now derogatorily called Egypt, then we have to remember that this is our culture as well. We have to embrace that and understanding of that being our culture. And as a matter of fact, before doing the video, I was like, well, let me change and put on something a little more bright to do the video because I had on a shirt that I didn't think was cute. And so I decided to put this on because this particular gown is called a galabia, and it actually came from Kemet. Although it comes from modern Kemet, so it has more of an Islamic influence, it's still nice to be in the gown that came from Kemet while telling the Kemetic tale. So, ecstasy, abundance, and bliss, peace, love, light, and prosperity to all of those who are wishing positivity for me and for my family. The lessons of life to those who are wishing us otherwise. I also pray that you feel yourself to be completely and totally enfolded by the Womb-niverse as she moves into this blissful time of rebirthing the light. I pray that you are able to open your arms and your heart and your mind wide and embrace this great shift that the entire Womb-niverse is experiencing at this time. I am so ready for the age of Aquarius. I was born in 1969. So that was when people began to prepare for Aquarius. So I've been ready since I got here. I'm ready for it. Let's move into this. Let's shift. Let's be better. Let's be more loving. Let's be sweeter. Let's be kinder to each and everything. Let's be kinder and better. All right. Give thanks. I must rest, because one thing that fasting does is it reminds you that there's a time to sleep and there's a time to rise. I don't always remember that. So I must rest. I pray that those of you who are fasting with me are having as uplifting as an enlightening a time as I am having. All right. I will see you soon. Peace and blessings and ekale. Greetings of the night to you.